For today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use the light pad in a stamped image to make a reflection or a shadow underneath your image. I'm starting with my favorite bunny from years ago from Hello Spring and some Memento Rich Cocoa ink. After I've stamped the bunny one time just on printer paper, I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to stamp the bunny again upside down. Well, it's easier actually if you turn your bunny upside down because then you can line up the bottom. So that's what I'm going to do. But I'm going to stamp him on the back so that I get a perfect reflection. And now I have what looks like a reflection of my little bunny perfectly positioned beneath the other one. And that's going to help me create my illusion. Next, I'm going to place a piece of cardstock on top of the image, and you can see I can still see both of them through there. And I'm going to start doing what's called the no-line coloring technique, which means that I'm just using the illuminated stamped image underneath my cardstock instead of the traditional stamped image on my cardstock that I'm coloring in. And I'm going to color the top bunny. And I've decided he's going to be a little cottontail. So I'm going to color him in some browns. And I'm starting with a touch marker with the brush tip in raw silk to put down just a base of color for the bunny. Then I'm going to come back with BR 107, which is sand. And I'm just going to start working on the definition of some of the darker areas of the bunny where you would normally see shadow or darker colors of fur. I'm going to lightly trace some of these darker areas, and then with the tip of this marker, which is so great to blend with, I'm just going to flick in towards the center of the bunny. Then I take the lighter color again, the raw silk, and I just go back and gently both flick and blend the line where the two of those come together. And I like to work in small areas, just a little bit at a time, just because it does a little bit of the work for you, sort of blends the marker more easily when it's wet than when you're working on dry cardstock. Although the beauty of these markers is that you can continue to blend them forever. And then I'm just going to go around the edges of his ears and do the same thing, again leaving them lighter in the center. And then on this front ear, I'm going to make the inside darker because that's how it would be in nature. And when you're working in areas like this, what you can do is, let's say I come to his head and that's been dry for a while. I can put a little pool of color down in the center of his head. And then when I come in here to use the darker brown and I blend in towards the center of the bunny, it just blends together more smoothly and gives me just a more, a more even gradient. And then heading into the last area, I'll do the same thing. Add just a little more of the original color and then lightly flick in towards that lighter color with the darker color. And as you go, you can also sort of clean up the edges if they've feathered a little bit. Just by coming back with this very fine tip will allow you to get a nice straight line. And then, of course, I'm going to check my work and make sure he doesn't look like a little space alien by turning off the light table. And I can finish some of my shading that way. Now that I have the light table off, I'm just going to work on him a little bit more until I get the details just how I like them. One of the things I noticed is it was a little bit hard to tell the difference between his two front feet. And when you're working with these markers, the more of a single color that you put down, the darker a shade of that color you'll get. So you can get a lot of depth and texture and shading with just a single color. And define his haunch a little bit more and his back foot. But I think you can see that he really is coming together, even though you don't have that crisp black outline of a stamp image that you're normally used to. Now I'm going to turn the light table back on so that I can see where my shadow is going to be. And the way I'm going to do the shadow is I'm actually going to start with our colorless blender. And I'm just going to put a layer of colorless blender all over my shadow bunny. And this is just to get the area wet so that I can blend my light gray, which is what I'm going to use for his shadow, just much more smoothly and easily. And also I don't want a whole heck of a lot of definition in my shadow, because unless it's a very, very bright sunny day and you're standing in exactly the right place, you're not going to get a very crisp shadow. Most shadows are going to be a little bit fuzzy, like their owners, the fuzzy bunny. So the color that I'm using here for the shadow, and I'm just gently sketching the outline of the bunny with it, is WG 0.5, which is the lightest gray that I have right now. And I'm coloring in very lightly the rest of the bunny, but I'm going to come back towards the real image, the positive image, and I'm going to add a darker gray up near the positive image. This just mimics what you would see in nature, in real life, when you see a shadow. And now, once again, I'm going to turn off the light table. And I'm going to check and see how my shadow is working. Now you can see I didn't fill in all of the areas. So I'm going to come back with the colorless blender and I'm going to blend these out just a little bit. And you'll see that pulls the gray color around the pool of colorless blender that I have working. And the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the definition of the edges of the shadow. Again, just because shadows aren't like that in real life, I want it to be a little more painterly and a little bit less realistic than I have it here. So I'm working from the white of the page into the shadow, and I'm just feathering those edges out just a little bit. And you'll see how much more like a painting it starts to look. And yet it retains the shape, the overall shape of the bunny. And so it's still a realistic shadow, even though it's a little less precise. Now I just realized that I had a bunny without a face. So I do need to come back and put his eye in. So I'm going to make sure he's lined up on my original image. And I'm going to take this very fine tipped touch marker and just put a little dot for his eye, and then he's a much more realistic looking bunny, and he looks more like the original stamped image.
They loved your look, they loved your sound, loved it when you came unwound, and you saw the world in a darker shade of blue. Oh, didn't you?